Chapter 24. Eloise stayed in her room throughout the remainder of the day, but it didn't provide the solace she was after. She flung open her window to let out the stuffiness, but the icy gusts brought no comfort. After a minute, she banged the window shut and sulked on her bed. A tear escaped, which opened the river until she was sobbing. Burying her face in her pillow, she screamed into it. Tobias tapped on her door.
Elle?
Go away! She didn't need his pity anymore. Turning Zeke away was the right choice, but it hurt. He said himself that he was still in love with Rachel. Regardless of what he'd said to sweet-talk her, his sights were elsewhere. She knew better than to let a man kiss her who hadn't made his intentions clear. Tobias would never approve of Zeke's behavior if she told him the half of it. Desperate to be loved, she'd almost let him get away with it. Another wave of grief washed over her. She was ashamed at how badly she wanted Zeke's kiss. Laying on her side on top of her bedding, she stared at the floral wallpaper until her vision blurred, and the flowers appeared to come off the wall and slide down but never reach the floor. She closed her eyes against the mirage and eventually fell asleep. Waking sometime during the night, she was hungry. Her face was swollen and her eyes were salt-crusted with dried tears. Lighting her lamp, she tiptoed down the hall and was careful to avoid the boards that creaked. The mess the boys left in the kitchen did not surprise her. The dishes had been moved from the table to the dishpan, but the table had not been wiped, nor the floor swept. Poking around in the cupboards, she found a package of store-bought crackers and a new jar of peaches. Leaning her hip against the counter, she stood to eat. The bowl of flour she had filled sat by the dishpan. Rather, the bowl of flour she and Zeke had filled, with his arms around her. She stuck a finger into the powder and twirled it around. Then, brushing off her hands, she searched in her work apron that hung on the wall for the letter Sam had delivered. The page with the verses scrawled on it called to her. She angled it toward the lamp and ran her eyes over the list again, but none of the references brought any specific verses to mind. She'd never memorized very many of them. Bringing the lamp with her to the front room, she found the family Bible in its proper place on the top shelf. It was right where it sat most of the time, except for Sundays when Tobias carried it to church. She settled into her wing-backed chair, the one belonging to her mother, and flipped through the pages for Zeke's first verse, Isaiah 41:10. She'd needed to use the table of contents to find it. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. That was a good start. The passage went on with more words of encouragement, and she wasn't able to stop at the one verse. Completing the chapter, she went to verse 1 and read it through 3 times, letting it sink in. The chapter was filled with words she wanted to pull out and paste all over the walls of her bedroom. Courage, strength, be not afraid, my friend, help, uphold, chosen thee. She had never considered God to be a friend. He was the creator, ruler, omniscient, majestic. She knew all of that, but a friend? No. She checked Zeke's note, squinting at his smeared ink, and looked up the next verse in the book of John. The thief does not come except to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, and they may have it more abundantly. Again, she found herself poring over the whole chapter. Jesus spoke of sheep and shepherds, and it was rather confusing, but the bit Zeke mentioned in verse 10, abundantly, what kind of life could that be? It wasn't what she had right now. Living in fear was not an abundant life, but how was she supposed to move toward that promise? Fear was a shield. She wasn't living abundantly, she was safe. The Bible was heavy on her lap, though the pages were thin. She thought of her parents reading through these same words. She had memories of her mother taking it off the shelf and silently reading in the mornings, and of her father carrying it to church each Sunday as Tobias did. When her parents were alive, it didn't live on the shelf for the 6 days in between Sundays. 15 was too young to lose a mother, and Eloise had always felt robbed of the last few years of her childhood. The thief had come and killed, and she'd been left. Now Jesus tells her to live abundantly? Absorbed in her study, Eloise was surprised to notice the change in the light out the window. Surely she hadn't been sitting here for hours. The black night turned gray as the white and dreary clouds on the horizon made an appearance. She watched evidence of the sun rising with hues of pink and gold before closing her eyes. She snuggled deeper in her mother's chair. She must have dozed, for Luke woke her, giggling at her jerk of surprise when he slapped his hands on her lap. "Morning," she said, finding Tobias watching her from the kitchen table with a ledger from the brickyard in front of him. Pulling the toddler into her lap, she cuddled him, and he wrapped his chubby hands around her neck. "Eat?" He pointed to the kitchen. "Yes, buddy, let's eat." She ignored Tobias's questioning look when she came into the kitchen.
"You look better."
He cast his eyes over her rumpled dress.
"Sort of."
A laugh burst out of her from his honesty. It bubbled out without thought, so no offense was taken. Her hair was still in its pins from yesterday, half up and half down. Her skirt was thoroughly wrinkled, but she knew what he meant. "I feel better." She eyed him from the side, knowing she owed him some hint of an explanation. "I'm sorry about last night. I was rude." Tobias grunted, fiddling with his shirt cuffs. She translated it to his implied, "I forgive you, but you still haven't told me what's going on." Once Luke was settled in his chair, she gave him a spoon and an empty bowl to play with. Eloise got out the pot and oats and pumped water to make oatmeal and coffee for breakfast. While she filled the percolator with water, Tobias busied himself by building a fire in the stove. "I should have started the fire when I came down," she said. "I didn't realize how cold it was during the night." Eloise peered out the window at the hazy sky. "Think the sun will come out today?" Tobias put his face to the window, squinting at the dull sky.
"Hope so."
He shuffled to the lean-to for the broom and walked around the table, sweeping last night's dinner crumbs into a pile. A knock at the door startled them both. Nothing less than an emergency would warrant a visitor at this hour. It was not yet 7 o'clock. Eloise took the broom from Tobias. "You go." Her heart tightened at the prospect of bad news. He returned promptly to the kitchen, unwrapping the paper from around a loaf of bread.
"Save your oatmeal,"
he said with a huge grin on his face.
"There's bread in the house again."
"Who was there?" Relief filled her. Tobias shrugged.
"Nobody. Just this sitting there."
He laid it on the table and went in search of the bread knife. "You didn't look down the street? Whoever left it can't be far off."
"Eat first, ask questions later,"
he said.
"That's my motto."
And then he had the audacity to whistle, as if he didn't have anything else on his mind but bread for breakfast, as if he wasn't bothered by fresh, warm bread appearing at their door. She knew it came from Zeke. Who else could it have been? But to leave a loaf of bread after she'd clearly told him to leave, was he making amends or toying with her still? She didn't have the energy to muddle through the hidden meanings this morning. She had work to do, the least of which included washing the dishes from Tobias's dinner yesterday.
"I can have it ready for you before closing," said Jacob Davidson after inspecting the bit rings. "The crack is small enough that we can repair it without trouble." "Thank you, sir. That's good news," Zeke said. Everything was coming together. He'd spent time shining his saddle and tack with the borrowed can of saddle soap from Frank. Samuel had done well with Susie Girl the past few days, and her coat shone from the extra rub-downs she'd been given. Thankfully, he'd noticed the crack in the bit ring on Susie Girl's bridle before he'd left. Once that was repaired, there was nothing else to be done. Zeke watched Isaiah Sage in the back of the smithy, bent over the second anvil, focused on his work. Even so, Zeke lowered his voice. "Mr. Davidson, I hope you'll excuse me. Is it true about your son?" "Depends," Mr. Davidson said. "What have you heard?" His jovial demeanor was in contrast with the topic of conversation. "Mr. Oakfield shared with me the method of Philip's death." A scowl washed over Mr. Davidson's face. He tossed the bridle on a pile of other projects to be mended and waved Zeke to follow him outside. The cool breeze was a welcome relief from the heat of the smithy. "It isn't Simon's place to speak of it. But yes, it's an event we don't often bring up." Mr. Davidson sighed and smacked his leather glove against his thigh, sending a cloud of black dust into the air. "I don't know what went on in Philip's mind, or what kind of demons he was fighting." He relaxed his expression and stared across the square at the groups of kids who had just been let loose from the schoolhouse. "We trust that God is merciful." "Yes, sir. I'm sorry to have brought it up. I only asked due to the nature of the accusation, and I doubted the source." "Eloise is a fine woman." Mr. Davidson turned to Zeke. "Florence and I gained a daughter when Philip married her. One of the best choices Philip ever made. But I've seen the way she looks at you." Zeke toed the ground and dug his hands into his pockets. He couldn't tell if Mr. Davidson was threatening him or not. "Yes, sir." Zeke opted for the noncommittal and safe answer. "You could do worse." Mr. Davidson thumped him on the back. The force of it caused Zeke to stumble forward, and his hands came out of his pockets to steady himself. Mr. Davidson laughed at Zeke's stumble. "I have work waiting. You can pick up the bridle tonight, or we'll have the doors unlocked before sunup tomorrow."